the images that you have shown all seem to have kind of quite a large background scene.
Yeah.
So what would you say if you show more focused objects, just very quickly,
Yes.
the same speed?
Yeah. Yeah.
Would it be
is
easier?
a little easier, but probably not much. I think the same would happen, that they would get about 80% of the... I mean, people have done that experiment.
Right.
It's an interesting one. But,
Yeah.
And I was wondering if an evolutionary biologist watched that. I was
Yeah.
wondering immediately, I saw a human being. Now, do you want to count that as an animal or not?
well, we actually tried seeing whether that made it harder. So we had slides with human beings, and it was much harder for them to get the animals.
But whether they, no, but that's the point.
'Cause- yeah.
Evolutionists think of a human being as an animal.
Yeah.
So I was saying that's an animal.
So we share a
in
lot of
your
features
framework.
with animals. We have legs and hair and so on. Yeah. So, okay. Another suggestion is that distributed attention...
His Holiness feels that there ought to be difference because
그런데 잘 맞으면서 두스텝이니.
Yeah.
또밀 쳐선 나버리지. 또왜 지나는 시 좋고.
because
내가 충분히 이메이나 그때 욕심이 있는 딱그 유지가.
Yeah.
because if there's only one
또밀 나한테만 나네. 원비셔를 나한테만 나네. 도둑이 와가해요 막.
Right. The binding problem might be easier.
easier
yes.
because the thing
Yeah.
is there's only one object
Yes,
in front
right.
of you,
Yeah.
even though the speed may be
No,
the
you're
same.
quite right, and I think it would be a little easier, but it's not a big effect, I think,
I know.
of having the scene there.
Definitely not. No.
Okay, so distributed or global attention might also form a summary of the scene, to summarize it, give us the average size, shape, color, and so on of the objects present. So when I look at a plant, I'm not very interested in the shape of every leaf. I want to know the average shape of the leaf and compare this, for example, with these, with these. And when I look at the scene with the flock of birds, I'm not so interested in each individual bird. I want to know that they're all the same species. Perhaps I need to know the typical bird. I need to abstract from it an average shape. If we try and simplify this to put it in the lab, we can ask people to judge the average size of some circles like this. And we find that people are very good at it. So, for example, if I show you this and then show you this, I can ask you two different questions. I can say, was this circle in the scene that I just showed you? Is it one of the ones that I showed you, the exact circle? And people are very bad at that, and they're worse if you have more circles. Excuse me. But if I ask you instead, is this larger or smaller than the average size of the display I just showed you? You're very good at it. People can do that easily. So it seems as if we abstract the average size from a whole display. And this looks very different from what you would predict if statistical averaging depended on focused attention. It doesn't matter how long you show the display. People get the average very quickly. We tried getting people to average some shapes like this. So if you look at this, now I can ask you, was this shape in the preceding display? People are saying yes. No. But the typical answer was yes, because it's the average of the previous shapes. Was this shape in the preceding display? Any offers? Yes, but the typical answer was no. People don't remember individual instances when several are presented at once. They just remember the average or the typical shape. Does this require focused attention?
Surely there will be a difference between whether you warn people or not.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, in the experiment, they get many, many trials, and they know what they're doing, yes.
Yeah. Because if they're warned, then their mind is being kind of more vigilant. And,
yeah,
you know,
and it helps a little, but not much. Yeah. I could show you the data, but I can just tell you now. So, does it depend on focused attention? Can we do another task at the same time? As David talked about task switching, trading one against another. When we asked people to look for a letter among digits. So here they're looking for the B. And then we tested them on the shapes. Was this shape presented or not? We found they were just as good at getting the average shape when they were also doing the letter and digit task. So it doesn't seem to require focused attention.
Well, and am I right
Yeah,
in
I'm sorry.
thinking that if it is the selective focus that is involved here, then they shouldn't be able to get the shape?
That's right, at the same time as getting the digit and among the letters, yeah. So these are examples of the kinds of information that we can get when we vary the conditions of perception and look at the kinds of errors that people make and the time they take to report things and so on. A third way to deploy attention is to direct it inward towards mental processes, thoughts or ideas, instead of outward. I've just been talking about outward so far. I wondered whether there's anything comparable in Buddhist psychology. So in an experiment, this wasn't work by me, but someone else compared doing an internal task, like adding 1 to each of 4 digits. So if I tell you 5281, you would have to say 6392. You added 1 to each of the previous digits. It's quite a difficult task. It requires a lot of attention. Could you combine that with an external task, looking for a letter K in a stream of rapid letters? And what they found was that while you're actually doing the mental arithmetic, not while you're hearing the digits, but while you're doing the mental arithmetic, you've gone internal, you are much more likely to miss the K than when you're just...
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
So it looks as if the two are in competition. It's difficult to direct attention inward and outward at the same time. So let's go back to the outline and look at the effects of consciousness and on behavior and so on. Is the role of attention limited to conscious perception and thought? There are many recent studies on both normal people and patients with brain damage which have shown that behavior and brains can be affected by cues in the environment of which we are quite unaware. So is watching people...
You want to explain cues?
Yeah.
Like
Cue, any
signs,
external
signs,
stimulus
yeah.
influence. I'll give examples. Is watching people do a less reliable guide to what's in their minds than we had thought. Let's just see. These are some new questions that we're asking. Is attention limited to controlling conscious thoughts, or are there also effects on unconscious thoughts? And can access to unconscious thoughts be improved through meditation? So here's one experiment. You make up a sentence that uses the following sets of words. Wrinkles, forgetful, short-sighted, retirement, or another group of subjects has apples, awkward, breezy, marketing. Obviously, the first set evokes images of old people, and the other one evokes only random associations. So now the measure in the experiment was nothing to do with this. They just compared...
Saying this may have more to do with the habituation of how words are associated with certain types of images.
It's certainly using associations, yes. All they did was measure how fast the subjects walked down the corridor to the next experiment after doing this experiment. What they found was that the people who had the wrinkles, forgetful and so on, walked more slowly down the corridor than the people who had the random set of words. The interesting thing, of course, was that they were quite unaware that they were walking more slowly or why they were walking more slowly. Also, in a later test for memory for the room in which they had been tested, they were more forgetful.
So this has been repeated many times.
Oh,
This
yes.
is not just once or
Yeah,
twice.
it's one example of many, many experiments as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only
I
the
didn't
point
believe
is
it at
it's been
first.
replicated
Yeah.
many times.
Yeah, I didn't believe it, but I think many people have replicated this
Yes.
and many other experiments. So in a later test of memory for the room in which the experiment was run, they were significantly more forgetful than the people with the neutral words. In another study,
It's only just saying that
groups of
this is quite weird.
Sorry. In another study, groups of students filled out forms. One group did so while they were sitting near a computer monitor that had this picture, fish, tropical fish floating by. They weren't told to look at it. It had nothing to do with the task they were given. Another group had...
The myths miselabio maris computer screen kan tija shaje the experiment is a room to naron ya.
And then they gave them various tests. And the effects of the dollar bills were substantial and surprising. They tended to make people into extreme individualists, more reluctant to ask help from others and more reluctant to offer help. For example, when each participant had to pull up a chair to talk to a stranger, those who had done the paperwork near the dollar bills put their chairs nearly 50% further away from the strangers than those who'd worked near the fish. When they were given a puzzle that was difficult to solve, the people who had sat near the money worked for much longer, twice as long, as the people who'd worked near the fish to solve the problem before they asked for help. Evidently, words and images related to money can automatically trigger self-centered actions. In no case was anyone consciously aware of any influence from the screensaver dollar bills. In the field of attention research, we also find evidence of unconscious processes in the absence of awareness. So in one experiment using a selective attention task, people looked at faces. So each of these pictures has a face in the center and a house in the surround. Okay? And they were told to attend to the faces in the center, and they had to detect whether any face was repeated, okay, whether they saw the same face twice. Meanwhile, in one group, the houses were often repeated. There were only 2 houses which were alternating. And in the other group, they were all new houses. Okay, nobody could report anything about the houses because they were studying the faces closely. The question is, are the houses having any effect in the brain that suggests that they are being analyzed? And the answer is yes. In the brain area that is specialized for houses, so this pink areas here, respond selectively to places, houses, general spaces like that. The blue areas respond to faces, so they're separate in the brain, and you can look and see what's going on. And what they found was that even when they were not aware of the houses repeating or changing, the house area was. So it responded more strongly when the houses were changing.
Because this is partly, again, an internal discussion here. The Buddhist term, manaskara, which is what we are translating as attention, and although there's a problem here, is an omnipresent mental factor which is thought to be present in any cognitive process, whether perceptual or conceptual. So which would suggest even in the case of someone viewing this scene, there will be some attention present.
Going to the
to the house.
To the houses, yes. Yeah. But they were unable to report
so
the
from
houses.
The modern Western scientific point of view, would you also say that there is some degree of attention being paid to the house?
It depends how you define attention. Clearly the brain is discriminating, so the brain is paying some attention to the houses.
냐가도 고박한세.
다른
세상 가는 소리야. 주지 섬지는 냐,人주지 섬지는 전 주지 섬지는 냐래. 네.
Yeah,
다른.
I'm just going to
그래도
skip the
그렇다.
last part, I think.
So in I mean in Buddhist psychology and in Buddhist psychology there is an understanding that whatever's familiar, the mind will be faster to attend to it.
Yeah.
So, for example, within the environment, compared to environment like a house or place, and human beings, the familiarity with human beings will be, stronger, so that we'll be able to attend to human beings much faster.
Yes, that's a good point.
Than an inanimate object.
Yeah, it would be interesting to do the experiment the reverse way round. You put the house in the center and attend to the houses and see whether people respond to the face, whether the brain recognizes the faces are changing.
Experiment chena kenzameros. Tanda ngushidi dongbaltas labarwa. Tadi kodone. The kide kangbadisha. And kangbadele mikbate aslab. Yeyuli mi dongbashabena. Yan lebe chik deria.
Yes, it's a good point, Your Holiness. Yeah. So far, I've given examples from normal, healthy people, but there are even more striking examples of unawareness in patients with brain lesions in particular areas of the brain. Again, we find minds that know things that they don't know they know. One striking example where brain damage has effects that seem to involve both attention and consciousness is known as neglect. Damage to the right hemisphere here, especially the parietal lobe, often results in an attentional problem that causes people to neglect a whole side of visual space. They don't see anything on the left. It's right-sided damage controls the left. It's not a visual deficit as such, so they're not blind. You can get them to attend, but it's difficult. They simply ignore things that are happening there. So if you wave a $20 bill on the left side of one of these patients, they won't respond at all. They leave the food on half their plate. If you ask them to copy pictures, so they were shown the pictures on the left and asked to copy them, these are the copies on the right that one patient made. He was quite unaware that he was leaving out half the picture. These are paintings by a neglect patient as he recovered over time. So he started out with the top left picture, leaving out, they're self-portraits, so you can see. A straightforward explanation might be that attention can't get over to that side of space anymore, that the left is somehow just unattended. But the straightforward explanation soon runs into some difficulty. So if you show a picture through a slit like this, okay, did you all see that? Mm-hmm. Here it is without the slit. The interesting thing was that the patients who looked at this, their attention is right on a single slit in the center, but they still neglected the left half of the camel. So they
even when passing?
Yeah. They built the picture up in time. They're converting time into space and neglecting the left half of that. So it's a complicated lesion. In order to do that, of course, they must first, in some sense, see the whole object so that they can suppress its left side. Another selective loss.
죄송해요 말해. 림베땅바이네 제가 유용 먼저다 수부체가 저도 고도 생명배나. So am I right in thinking that even when they are shown the camel through the slit where it's passing through, they still fail to see the left half?
Yes, they suppress the left half.
What about if they look at a small dot, like the?
They can't neglect the left. No, they would see they'd either see the dot or not see it.
I
don't think they'd divide a dot in half. Yes, you could make it bigger and bigger.
Is there a sense, is there an understanding how large size do you need
a good question.
Before they start chopping it off?
Very good question. You'd make a good psychologist. So here's another patient. She had damage to the occipital and temporal lobes, and this made her unable to identify objects at all, not just on the left, or even simple lines and orientations. She couldn't tell whether a line was upright or horizontal. But when you gave her a card and asked her to post it through a slit, as here, she had no difficulty orienting the card in the right direction to get it through the slit. So she was clearly identifying the orientation in order to make her hand work correctly, but she couldn't tell you it's horizontal, not vertical. I once saw a video of another patient who was shown a picture. He had the same difficulty with recognizing objects. He was asked, "What's this?" And he didn't know, hummed and hawed. He said, "Is it a pencil?" But meanwhile, his fingers were doing this. He was playing the clarinet. So again,
You
know that you know.
This is a very strange situation.
it is, yes. This is it's very strange. This is another example where his hands seem to know something that his mind does not know.
맞아요. 안들 다 가서 독세시었는데 걔 말하다 고.
말해.
그런
말해.
욕을 봐.
말해.
또 그런 거 그 문제면 해서 줘.
But the thing is, even to do this gesture, there has to be some intent,
motivation,
thought, yes,
behind it,
yes,
which would suggest that there is some knowledge.
Yes. Oh, yes.
You know,
the knowledge is there in the brain somewhere, and it gets to the hands, but it doesn't get to the conscious mind.
그런 게 신기하거든. 그런 게 신기해서 그렇지.
This is exactly what you're referring to as implicit knowledge.
Yes, this is implicit knowledge.
스스로도 신기하거든. 마시면서 그렇지.
There are many other examples. I don't have time to give them, but it is a very surprising set of facts, set of findings that we need to take account of, I think, in trying to explain the brain. To fit it to our Western models is not easy. So I think this is one of the big discoveries about the brain, that is its degree of specialization, how information can be in one part of the brain and not accessible to another part, not accessible to the conscious part or the verbal part. There seem to be areas that specialize in recognizing faces, houses, in controlling hand movements, in storing locations, in retrieving words from our mental dictionaries. I mean, really a dispersal of many, many different functions in different parts of the brain. And I think these findings have produced fairly profound changes in our understanding of the mind. We think of ourselves as unitary identities. So we either see the pencil or the clarinet, or we don't see it. But patients cast some doubt on this unitary notion of the individual. We sometimes...
So would you say that the person who is shown the clarinet, and although he is not able to identify the object, but is showing the gestures, was he a musician, so that there is a familiarity?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And that might make a difference.
It might, certainly, yes. Yes. But I think it still poses a problem, even if he was a musician. I don't know if this patient was.
Because if he was a musician, then because of the familiarity, then one would expect there is some form of subconscious level of knowledge that may immediately react in the bodily behavior.
But there are, I think, many other examples where it doesn't depend too much on familiarity.
are also occasions where you might have seen many times.
So there is a lot of strong habituation to the familiarity with the object.
Yes, that certainly has an effect. Yes, but
Even though playing yourself, you see other people playing.
you see.
공부왕
Yes, yeah. I don't know. That's not probably an instrument that is used in India. But in the West, of course, he was familiar with the clarinet. Yeah. So we sometimes use a metaphor for the mind as being an organization, maybe something like the United Nations, where lots of information is floating around in different offices, different files. Not all of it is accessible to everyone. When would we say that the United Nations knows something? I think it's almost analogous to the mind. Would we say the United Nations knows it when Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, knows it? Or if some lowly clerk somewhere in an office knows it, or if the information is in a file somewhere in the building? And I think the same kind of dilemma may apply to the mind. It functions like a kind of organization of semi-independent pathways and processes, using different subsets of information to do different tasks and using them in different ways. The set that becomes conscious may be those that make a coherent, organized story about what is happening to us, bringing together selected relevant information from many different specialized subsystems, but leaving the detailed evidence for those conclusions and the detailed implementation of the selected actions to unconscious processes. This evidence of the mental processes can sometimes be unconscious, I think, raises some interesting questions about meditation. Is this view compatible with the Buddhist view of the mind as a multiple set of mental processes? I think it may be.
That's fine. It's compatible.
Yes, we can bring it up in the discussion again, yes. In the last part of my talk, I was going to describe a few studies that we did of attention tasks in people who were adept meditators who had practiced many hours. Some of them were Buddhist monks. One actually was Mathieu. We chose 4 different tasks that showed dramatic limits to attention in normal people, and we wondered whether the meditators would show any differences in the tasks. I will summarize briefly because there's no time to go into a lot of detail, but in one experiment we asked people to do a search task which required binding. So look for the green X. Normal people take time to find it. They have to look at each item in turn. Would the Buddhist monks, would the people with meditation practice find it more quickly? The answer is no, they didn't. But the next task was more interesting. It's known, these were the results. It's known as the attentional blink, and I'll explain it in a moment here. The attentional blink, I showed you something similar with my stream of pictures where you were looking for an animal. In this task, you're looking for 2 targets in succession, so maybe 2 animals. We vary how far apart in time they are. So how soon does target 2 come after target 1? And what we find with normal people is that they are very likely to miss target 2 if they've just detected target 1. It keeps them busy. It grabs their attention, focuses them on that, and they lose target 2. The question is, would that happen with the meditators? So this is a graph of normal people. They're only getting about 20% correct when target 2 immediately follows target 1. And it gradually recovers as the interval gets longer. Here are the meditators. They were actually very much better. This is when they were in the state of open presence. They were doing that kind of meditation. And they found it a lot better. There are some other interesting exceptions to the attentional blink in normal people. They throw some light on why the meditators might also show this effect. In the first, people watched moving dots. So they watched the pictures, and then around them there were dots moving outward, like this, expanding. And they showed much less attentional blink. They looked more like the meditators than like the normal people. If the dots were moving inward, contracting, focusing you, they didn't show any benefit. So expanding, distributing attention seems to give you a better ability to detect targets. Another exception was when there was music playing in the background while the search through the letters was performed. Again, the attentional blink was considerably reduced by the music. I think, again, this kind of relaxes you, spreads attention more broadly, and allows you to detect targets without being grabbed, focused inward by the first target. And another interesting finding was that when people are happy, they naturally spread attention more globally, whereas when they're sad, they use a narrow focus. So in one experiment, people were shown stimuli like this, which made them happy, or else they were shown stimuli that made them sad, which I won't show you because I don't want to make you sad. And again, they were better after seeing these happy pictures than the sad ones. Again, perhaps relaxation induces a more global allocation of attention. It was a change detection task, so you show a picture like this, and it's going to alternate with another picture which is the same except for one change. Can you see the change, Your Holiness?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to stare for a very long time before seeing it. It's actually this is coming and going.
Yes.
We wondered whether the meditators would be better at spotting the change than non-meditators, and I'm again afraid the answer was no. And finally, we looked at visual constancy. This relates to the sensory. I'll just quickly show this one because I think it relates to the question about sensory versus conceptual. When you look at this picture and I ask you to compare the two squares labelled A and B, can you see them in the picture? Yeah. Are they the same colour or different colour? They, I think, to everybody look a different colour. Actually, there they are when you take away the surrounding. And we wondered whether meditators would be able to abstract that better than normal people. We actually used this picture as well. Again, the monster that comes second looks much larger than the monster that comes first because of the perspective cues. It's actually exactly the same size.
Same size, really.
Same size, yes. So we asked people, what size is it on the page? You know, in inches or centimeters. You don't believe me?
His Holiness was saying that if you shift the perspective, then...
Yeah, if you look at you might be able to get it, yes. Yeah. If you can suppress the surroundings, you can do it. I can more or less do that, but the meditators were not really able to do it. This is in a neutral state, and this is in meditative state, and there's really not much difference between the two. Okay, I think I'll stop at this point. We'll raise the questions during the discussion afterwards.
Thank you very much.